The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.
Hey Teddy, have you noticed how little attention science and health issues get in the media?
Totally, Edgar, yet science information is very important.
Yeah, for sure. That's why the Health Journalists Network is here.
How can they help?
They are a group of journalists dedicated to advancing public understanding of healthcare issues through impactful reporting on health and science.
Oh, really?
Yes, they meet up every month with scientists and researchers, policymakers, and activists at the science media cafes. They then relay what they discuss to the public.
Does that benefit us?
Oh yes, very much so. This helps with health and science literacy for a healthy Ugandan society.
Okay. I love getting informed about science and health issues. Health information makes all the difference between life and death. I'll look them up and engage them.
That's great. They are based all over the country.
Oh, okay. That's interesting, and they should be making real impact.
They are empowering health communities through journalism. Journalists can save lives just like doctors.
The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.
I want to suppose that our viewers are doing wonders, but also happy for keeping it digital. Every Friday, 5 to 6 p.m., we have Face the Nation as a show, where we look for opinion leaders to share with the state what their opinion is in terms of the sequence of events. Gladly today, we have a veteran human rights defender, Dr. Livingston Ssewanyana. Dr. Livingston Ssewanyana is the Executive Director of the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative. It's quite an old organization in this country that has mentored, of course, so many, but also done quite impressive work when it comes to human rights advocacy. Today, we want to hear from him with his expertise, first of all, to shed for us the picture of human rights in Uganda. And Dr. Ssewanyana, I will gladly ask you to say hello to our viewers, and then we shall proceed, sir.
Dear viewers and listeners, we are delighted to share this space with you today. And as always, it's always a pleasure to appear on this digital platform.
Thank you, sir. First things first, if you don't mind, paint for us the state of human rights in this country, given your expertise vis-a-vis the previous times, where we are and where you think we are headed to.
Speaking about human rights in Uganda, one would agree with me that we have expressed some democratic reversals. In the early 90s, following the advent of the NRM government, generally there was excitement in this country in terms of freedoms of speech, expression, association and assembly, and even the right to participate in governance. As the years went by, increasingly, we seem to be a steady reversal as spaces narrow for expression, and more importantly, following the 2026 election, one could say we have experienced a serious drawback. As we recall, in the run-up to the 2026 general elections, We experienced internet shutdown. We experienced heavy deployment of security forces. We experienced harassment of opposition supporters. But we also experienced a sense of uncertainty about the outcome. And of course, that speaks volumes about our rights situation. So looking forward, those challenges will need to be met. We have legislative frameworks that inhibit free expression and civic participation. We also experience generally a tense atmosphere in terms of political participation, but also in terms of what one may call transition. As we are aware, the NRM government has been in power for 40 years, and one wonders how far they can go. But beyond that, and more importantly, putting aside civil and political rights, we also needed to look at social and economic rights. The level of service delivery in terms of access to resources, in terms of poverty eradication, in terms of quality education, housing, I think Uganda still lags behind so many countries. So we experience high levels right now of unemployment, especially of the youth. Much as we churn out a lot of graduates each year, we experience high levels of poverty, despite programs that government has brought, like parish development model, Myoga and the like. We experience very poor public infrastructure in terms of roads, heavy traffic, congestion, and poor health service delivery, including poor educational facilities, particularly those run by the state. But we're also concerned about disproportionate taxation, as well as sometimes what one seems to experience, a growing culture of corruption within the political and public ranks. So looking at both civil and political rights, as well as economic, social, and cultural rights, one would argue that all is not well.
Okay, you say all is not well, and I want to also get your view, because as far as I know, you do a lot of civic education as an organization, but also with your sister organizations. Looking at your performance now as a bigger sector, not Foundation for Human Rights Initiative, do you think you have done enough, first of all, to educate citizens? Because you mentioned poor infrastructure, corruption, to mention but a few. But there is the government, which is supposed to be put in check. There is you on behalf of the citizens, and then the ordinary citizens. Have you done, as a sector, your role? And you're like, we have done our best. I think it's now up to the citizens.
We can never do enough because the demand is overwhelming. But on the other hand, we need to be mindful that our role is complementary. It's the duty of the state to empower its citizens and to provide. So in terms of civic empowerment, much as we know these roles are provided for in the Constitution, to the Electoral Commission, Uganda Human Rights Commission, there's still much more that needs to be done. Going by the outcome of the elections, as you know, two things were very pronounced during the recent elections. One, we experienced the lowest voter turnout in our history. That was unbelievable. But two, in terms of the elections, I think we still experienced the highest invalid votes ever recorded in our election, which again speaks volumes about the level of civic empowerment and also interest in these civic exercises. But beyond that, the institutions that have been charged with the duty of providing both civic education and electoral-related education, they are yet to do what they're supposed to do. Quite often they argue that they are not well resourced. So we as citizens organizations, we could have done more, but the space has been very limited. It continues to narrow, and the funding also continues to decline. As we recall, for example, in the run-up to the 2016 general elections, one would agree with me that organizations, civic organizations, did their best.
Yeah.
We held very many campaigns, Topoa.
Yeah.
We partnered with both the state as well as the media, and I think word went around. And I think on record, other than the elections we had in 1996, shortly after the promulgation of the Constitution, we registered the highest turnout ever in our electoral history. So that means that we could do more, and if that continued, I would imagine that we would even do better. But the challenge is, since those elections, civic organizations have not had the opportunity to organize and be able to deliver on that ground, mainly because the funding landscape continues to diminish. As we know, ever since DGF left the scene, there has hardly been any meaningful funding to NGOs. And neither has the government been able to provide support, both political, moral, and otherwise, to these organizations. So our performance then has largely been affected by those factors. The demand from Ugandans for civic education, but also for space. I would also argue that the level of consciousness among Ugandans is very, very high. If you read the different global reports, you'll find Uganda is one of those countries with the highest literacy rates, actually over 75%, according to the global ranking. However, in terms of room for participation and access to resources to enable them to participate, we still score very poorly.
Who blocks their participation?
Our participation is very much affected, one, by our ability to finance it, meaning that because the country remains one of the poorest countries, it's very difficult, despite your level of literacy, to participate effectively. Your voice cannot be heard. But also, in terms of freedoms, to be able to echo and air people's concerns, that is also very limited. We recall, for example, in the 90s, there were a lot of public spaces, which we used to call ebimeza.
Yeah.
And people used to echo their concerns, and the state used to engage with the population. All that is no more. As of now, the space is limited largely, maybe social media, or to a few radio and TV, which are also exercising a lot of censorship, self-censorship. They hardly actually allow very vibrant engagement, save a few but even those I would say are not really very, very pronounced, like capital gang.
Yeah.
Those are very few. Frontline, they're still very few, and they don't really enlist as many voices as possible. So the state has not created that enabling environment for people's participation to be enhanced. Neither have we had the capacity at an individual level to be able to expand those spaces.
Thank you, Dr. Ssewanyana. Now, going by what you have explained, why do you think state would shrink such spaces?
I think it's a very interesting...
Could it be for fear of extremism from our end as citizens, that, no, look, you ought to be guided, you ought to be, put to order? What do you think state would?
I think there are two things here one has to consider. One is the nature of the state. We describe the Ugandan state currently as a weak state.
What do you mean a weak state?
A weak state is that one that relies a lot on use of force. A strong state is that one that relies a lot on people's voices in decision making.
They will argue we have parliament with over 529 MPs.
It's not about quantity, it's about quality. So states which are called rights respecting societies are strong states. States that rely a lot on use of force, for example, the military, are weak states. So one, the nature of the state. Number two, the level of service delivery. If you are unable to offer services that satisfy the public, you become fearful of the public. So you cannot actually allow them too much space, because that will work against you. For example, if your roads are bad, your delivery of health is poor, your educational services are still poor, there is still a lot of corruption in the public sector, and then you find yourself in a situation where there is generally dissatisfaction with the state. The tendency of that state is to narrow the space, because if it doesn't, then it is an enemy of its own.
You are fond of engaging different stakeholders. In your engagements, do you mention this to the powers that be, that look, there is need to open space, or you consider being at the extreme, state at the extreme, and also citizens on their own?
When you provide complementary services like we do, it's very important to engage the state, because the state is the enabler. It's called the enabler. Without it, you can't do anything. So we engage different organs of the state, the judiciary, parliament, local government, mention it. We do identify these challenges, and there are areas where there is progress in terms of cooperation. But still, it is not enough. For example, we work closely with the judiciary in providing legal aid services and ensuring access to justice. But still, prisons are overcrowded. There is a high case backlog, despite the innovations. So it's still a work in progress. We engage with Parliament on legislation, but still we have draconian legislation that requires to be reviewed. We engage with the local government, but local governments claim they only receive 70% of the national budget, and therefore they cannot deliver. So at the end of the day, despite these effective partnerships, we still cannot forge the progress we need in order to enhance not only the spaces but the delivery of services. So I think there is need for more proactivism on the part of the state. It needs to address some of those areas where there seems to be a lot of spillage of resources. For example, one of the biggest challenges for the Ugandan state is the debt burden. Uganda faces increasingly a high debt burden and has to service that debt. But the question is, what caused that debt? If borrowing is not a solution to the problem, then one has to think carefully about the solution. Why do you continue to borrow when it's not providing you the solution? Two, priorities in budget allocation. Too much money goes to politically related expenses. The parliament, which we are talking about, the oversized executive, and other related institutions. We still, as a government, it needs to prioritize those areas which would contribute to improvement of public welfare. More money needs to go into education, into health, into road infrastructure, into areas that actually would improve the plight of the people. Apparently, more money seems to go into areas that are really politically driven. And I think that is one area which remains gray. It's a real gray area in terms of how the state prioritizes its expenditure. But also, they are not sufficiently investing in commercialized agriculture as well as industrialization. If you look at developed countries, what they have done are three things. One, they ensure that they invest highly in areas that contribute to improvement of public welfare. So health and education is key. Number two, they invest in areas that increase economic opportunity. That means more money goes into industry, more money goes into commercialized agriculture. Then three, they also invest a lot in leisure. Because leisure is a service, but that service can improve people's welfare. You find countries like the UK, aside from industrialization and agriculture, you find a lot is in terms of service delivery. The air industry, the shipping industry, all of this is service. They call it service. The hotel industry, the tourist industry, you find those areas, they attract a lot of income flow. And that contributes to improvements in terms of employment, earnings, and then people's standard of living goes up. So we still need to rethink and reorganize our revenue appropriation.
Going by what you mentioned, there is information, at least with us, that the government is doing its best. And to tell you, it has done the Myoga, it has done the wealth creation, of course, has done the youth livelihood fund, to mention but a few. Don't you think they are trying to do something, or you have an otherwise opinion?
You see, if you look at the different programs that government has come up with, it's high time that there is a review of whether those programs are really making a difference. Because by now, a majority of the population should have actually improved their welfare. But government also acknowledges that poverty is on the rise. So where is the missing link? The missing link may be that those programs are not well suited to the nature of requirements that our society has. that we need to go back to the drawing board. There have been accusations that those who actually receive this money are not the best
The
placed.
suitable.
They are not the poorest of the poor who needs to have more access and better access. It seems to go to the same people all the time, which doesn't change the status quo. That could be a challenge. Two, it seems like people need skills to translate this money into viable programs that can uplift their standard of living. When money goes to poor people who have too many needs, it is very unlikely that they reinvest that money appropriately. So it is also possible that that money is consumed before it's actually invested. That also is a challenge. So you're already looking at the target group needs to be rethought, the purpose needs to be rethought, and maybe one may need to go back to the model of cooperatives, the real traditional cooperatives, because this is an agricultural country. The bulk of our population should be encouraged
To do agriculture.
to go to do more meaningful agriculture and resources extended to them for that purpose. When we're growing up, our parents were growing coffee, they were growing cotton, they were growing tobacco, and they were selling this to cooperatives, meaning that they were able to access finances in return through those cooperatives, and were able to meet their basic needs. Today, you hardly see people actually who have a viable source of income. No wonder land disputes have increased in this country. Why? Because it seems to be the only resource available now to the poor. You find families subdividing constantly their little land and selling it off. So at the end of the day, more disputes and buying border borders. The border borders are outpacing the vehicles right now. But the border borders cannot be seen as an economy. They cannot improve anyone's economic muscle. So at the end of the day, we need to rethink some of these programs. The programs need also input from the population. They seem to be largely top down
Than bottom up.
Yeah. Talk about investments. If you go to Bangladesh, it's one of the poor countries, but the standard of living is growing. If you go to Vietnam, countries which are very poor, but the standard of living is going up. You know why? They have programs which are bottom up. For example, in Bangladesh, they have what's called the Grameen Bank. The Grameen Bank lends to people, poor people, money at the lowest interest rate possible, and they are able to invest in small industries like knitting, sewing, small programs, and they make money. If you look at the Chinese economy, the Chinese economy is not based largely on big industry. It's based on small family households which are doing something, and they're churning out money and meeting basic needs. And the standard of living of the people is going up. Can we emulate things like that here? Instead of having top-down programs, which at the end of the day do not change the status quo.
In that angle, I have two questions for you in that particular aspect. First of all, is your comment about the government giving cash to people, now in particular PDM, because you saw the president even moving around towards elections, and he seems to be very, very convinced, at least by the records. He seems to be very convinced. Do you think government is in a position to help people change their financial status by dishing or giving them liquid cash in this manner, $1 million, for instance, per household?
I think other than Jesus who turned bread and wine, eh? who turned bottles of water into wine,
Well, yeah.
and I am not aware of an economy which has sufficiently improved, mainly because money was being given to its citizens. I am not aware of an economy anywhere in the world.
Uganda is going to break the record.
Maybe this will be the first economy where you give out money to people and you are able to transform their lives.
In your view, you are of an opinion that it may. Okay, you haven't seen any country that has it.
I'm not aware.
Aware.
Maybe there could be, but I'm not aware of any nation on earth where money is given to people and that has transformed their lives. Money is normally given as a gift. Money is given as when you appreciate someone. But you know very well when you're poor and you have a lot of needs and someone gives you money. No wonder many of these circles, they have a lot of disputes. People are running away with the money because that's not how you transform economies. You can only transform an economy through initiatives of people where, you know, investments are made and of course profits are made and they are regenerated, reinvested. That is how communities are improved. But you can't improve by giving money. And I'm sure much as that seems to be an option that government has exercised, I think they are yet to come back and show decisively how they have transformed the plight of the people. So I think they needed to be rethought. But also the other issue is the amounts they are giving. Because if you give someone 1 million shillings, if you go to a supermarket today, chances are that with 1 million shillings, you may not come back with it. But you are giving someone 1 million shillings with the hope that he or she is going to transform that money, translate it into billions. It's very unlikely. It's a miracle. Okay. It's a miracle of sorts.
As we wait for the miracle to be performed, I want to make reference to the countries you have mentioned, Bangladesh, of course, China, and so many other. You have mentioned also Vietnam. It's on record that the NRM government is full of elites. That is a fact. Unlike other governments, and where one would maybe raise a defense of, no, we didn't have an educated cabinet or parliament, or to mention but a few. What is the real problem? Because we have educated leaders, at least parliament, at least people have bachelor's degrees. Cabinet doesn't have an A-level dropout, rather, they're also graduates. Where do you think the problem is that we have uneducated administration vis-a-vis stagnation when it comes to development?
I think there are very many reasons why the transformation we are seeking seems not to be emerging. One, it's bloated. Much as it's already a bloated public infrastructure, it's too bloated. So much of the money goes to themselves. First of all, the money is not actually going down to the people. It is used by them. Despite that they are knowledgeable and they are exposed and so on, they are taking biggest chunk of the money meant for societal transformation. Why? I mean, if you look at parliament, you look at the executive, it's already too bloated to make sense. I think America, Trump's cabinet, when it sits, I'm sure you have seen, may not be more than 25. Even neighboring republic, Kenya, may not have more than 25 ministers. How many do you have? How many? I mean, and then you get into even ministries. There are you find one ministry having 5 ministers. I mean, they are all taking the money meant for improving our livelihoods. So one of the biggest problems is not that they are not educated, knowledgeable, and exposed. One of the biggest problems is that you have a bloated apparatus which consumes, I would say, I think they consume 60% of what is meant to go to the population. And you can see what they are doing. Look at the fleet of vehicles they have. Look at everything is too much into lavishness. So they are consuming, which is not the case elsewhere, whether in the UK, US. Actually, I think we have a model in this country which other countries should understand, because there is nowhere I am aware where you have this type of bloated public setup. I mean, you find someone, just one minister going with 5 vehicles. The president of the Republic of South Africa, one of the richest countries, because I've been there, has only 1 vehicle, police vehicle following him. I was there and I've noted.
Seriously, like 2 vehicles, 1 lead car and
1
his?
police car, lead car. That is all. The Prime Minister of England does not own a plane. He has no plane. He travels first class on British Airways. Tell me, I am not aware of the nature of public expenditure that we experience here anywhere else. It's too bloated and definitely cannot serve the purpose. So that is one problem. The other problem is that the planning process. When you look at government plans, they are extremely good on paper. In terms of implementation, again, that speaks differently. So we have a problem. When you look at the national action plan, when you look at all these plans that are excellent, but on the ground, there are a lot of questions. That's another issue. That in terms of implementation, it's different. 3, corruption. Too much corruption, again, affects the ability to translate these ideals into reality. Then 4, they abandoned a very important policy which had been adopted as a way of enhancing people's participation in governance. That was the decentralization policy. You know very well that in 1997, Uganda adopted a decentralization policy and was hailed by many countries because of that. But increasingly, the policy has faded. Recruitment seems to come from the top. Decisions are no longer made at the local level. No wonder the local governments are claiming they only receive 7%. And yet they are the ones who are supposed to trigger the local development process. And they don't have resources. Actually, if you go to all these districts, you'll find that the offices are largely idle. People rarely even go there. And when they have their councils, their only interest is the allowance they will get. This is the whole thing. So at the end of the day, how can you trigger the national development process that you need? So there is a problem there. The other problem, I would argue, has also a lot to do with the human rights practice. There is what is called a disengagement, a disconnect between the state and the population. There is a gradual and growing disconnect between the population and the people. People's ideas no longer find room in national planning. The planning is top-down, and therefore what people desire and prioritize is not what actually is the basis of planning. So there is already a problem. There is a disconnect.
Is that an honest opinion where we have our MPs and we think they represent all of us and our ideas are per what they say onto the floor?
I think that is the theory. That's the theory. The practice is very different. I'm not aware, for example, of MPs sitting in the development planning processes of the districts. They don't sit there. I'm not aware of an MP who sits there and says, look, as we plan, this is the priority. They don't. If anything, they speak from their mind. They don't speak from an informed source. Let me tell you something interesting, and I think Ugandans need to appreciate. In Switzerland, having been a member of the UN for the last 6 years. In Switzerland, if you want to pass a policy, it is voted at the lowest level, at the village, with the call communes or councils. You have to vote. If you want a road to pass here, they have to vote.
Not at Parliament, and then you say this road.
You can't say that we are going to have a road here
bypass
in
or
Switzerland.
something.
You can't. At the local level, at the village, the people have to vote. You bring a proposal, and people will vote. Every issue of a public nature in Switzerland is voted for. No wonder it's the part of the world. Everybody would like to go to Switzerland. Eh? And you know, when you look at the nature of planning and the quality of life and the standard of living of Switzerland, it's unbelievable. It's one of the highest in the world. You know, I went to Switzerland. I didn't even know that there were currencies that were stronger than the euro. You see, I had thought that the euro
Was the
and the
strongest?
British pound were the strongest currencies. And it's so interesting. People don't even know that the Swiss franc is stronger than the euro. Do you know what that means? It's a small country, but everyone desires to go there. Do you know why? Because their human rights record is the best you can talk about. One, people are part of the planning. And why do they plan? Every decision of a major
bottom
impact
up.
has to be voted for in Switzerland. They took us through the processes, and I just could not imagine. Everything, you see, if we have a village like this one here in Zambia, you want to bring a water tank, that decision has to be ratified by the community. They have to vote on it. Where does that happen? You don't see it here. So people sit back and they think, oh, this is the best for everybody. And that may not be actually the best. So the problem is the extent to which we are connected as a people. You see, the extent to which our structures are actually utilized. Look at the LCs. They were a wonderful creation. Actually, the world hailed us for creating RS. They were called RCs and now LCs. But you tell me something about LCs today. People have called them, they hardly do the work. What they do, they are brokers. They are land brokers. Why? Because they have nothing else. They have to survive and they have no business to transact. Yet they were actually supposed to be the engine of growth, engine of stability, engine for virtually everything. They have been largely ignored. You know that LCs, they earn 10,000.
Yeah.
What does 10,000 mean to anyone? And do you expect somebody earning 10,000 to be of use? So at the end of the day, the structures, the systems that we have created are not being utilized for the planning, the development process. And that is where things go wrong. It's not about knowledge. It is all about those problems that I've identified that explain and account for the shortfalls.
If I may ask you, Dr. Ssewanyana, you mentioned that one of the problems you mentioned is the large administration. But your colleagues, whom I am sure that you even have friends in government and such administrative sector rather, don't you think that they know and see this problem, that there are so many? And if they do, what else now is the other hidden problem that we may not be in position to see? Because I doubt whether, for instance, the president doesn't see that he has a large cabinet, a fleet, now if I may use the word, of advisors. I don't think that people don't see that we have a bigger parliament. What is the other problem that we may not seem to see?
What we don't seem to see are many things. One, we don't see greed at work. There's a lot of greed. And that explains it. I mean, you look at the elections we have just gone through. the amounts of money that was spent, the treatment people gave, underwent. Why would you do that unless there is greed? And you see, greed is at work. The other problem that we have is that within states, there is what is called the deeper state. So the minister may not be part of the deeper state. There is always what they call the deep state. It is always the deep state that sometimes may be the problem. Who is in the deep state and what priorities do they have? So it could be partly due to that. It may not be a problem of cabinet. It is not a problem of parliament. It may not even be a problem of NRM as such. It is, they are within a state, there is a state, there is a deeper state. The question is, that deep state, what is its motivation? We have to look at that. Then, of course, our ability to counter the state
as
a people,
citizens. Okay.
as citizens, we have very limited ability to counter the excesses, largely because of our history. We are a traumatized society, and that is important. If you study the history of this country, you realize that this society, the Ugandan society, is highly traumatized because of what we have gone through. So many of us have lost relatives, many of us have lost friends, many of us. So the question then is, how far can you go? How far are you willing to go to counter the excesses? And I think the other challenge is that we also have a militarized state. As someone who lived in Nigeria for a whole year, I know what a militarized state looks like, and the shortfalls of a militarized state. The way the military operates, it doesn't believe too much in negotiation. No. As you know, they go by orders. So at the end of the day, there is limited negotiation over matters. There are orders at work. And when there are orders at work, there is very limited innovation and new ideas. So that is also a challenge of militarization of the state. When the state is militarized, then you have a problem of limited participation, but also limited engagement and involvement. So ideally, you could mean well, but your structures cannot offer you that opportunity. So I think there is, I keep saying, we need introspection. We need introspection into virtually everything which is in place. Introspection in terms of the policies we make. Introspection in the laws that we have made. Introspection in the structures that are in place. Introspection in our motivations in terms of how we govern ourselves. So there is a lot at stake, and however well-intentioned, however well-meaning you are, because of those deficits, call them bureaucratic deficits, you cannot actually achieve the intended objective. It becomes very difficult.
In our remaining minutes, you mentioned Uganda is a traumatized country. How do we heal from such a state to now a literally harmonious country with happy people? How do we
One way of dealing with that is dealing with the deficits I've mentioned. You deal with the deficits. You have to deal with the deficits in terms of planning, deficits in terms of involvement, deficits in terms of structure, deficits in terms of, the whole state apparatus. There are deficits. And those deficits, unless there is a deliberate effort to address them, it becomes very hard for you to achieve what they call the socio-economic transformation of the population. It's not about the motivation. The motivations can be very good, I mean, if you look at our national plans, the motivation is excellent. If you look at some of the laws, the motivation is there. But the problem is who is there to implement them and to make them a reality. So you deal with the deficits. You deal with the deficits in a very structured manner and deliberately so. You know, if you have a bloated public infrastructure, you have to address with that deficit. If you have a policy framework that is rhetorical but not practical, you deal with that deficit. If the issue is militarization of the state, you have to deal with that deficit. Until those are dealt with, we still will always have a problem. So it doesn't mean that the government is not doing what it should do. They are doing what they can, but because they have not deliberately, you know, addressed these shortfalls, you still have those constraints. That's why the population will now be disconnected. Why are they disconnected? Because they don't feel that they are responding to their duty. I mean, how can you tell me, sincerely, I'm not really necessarily have to be a critic of government, that in 5 days, I only get power 2 days a day. You tell me. I mean, what sort of service delivery is that? I mean, you go home, power is off. You wake up in the morning, power is off. Tomorrow, I mean, what sort of business do you do?
Some people on social media are making fun that now the power is view once. You know that?
Okay, you tell me. So,
it's like a status.
Does it require you to be a critic of the regime, to be dissatisfied? Sincerely? It just speaks for itself. I mean, from home to here, I don't know how long I spend. I spend hours getting here. By the time I get here, my spirits have dampened. Does it require critique for me, for one to be dissatisfied? If I have a vehicle, when I lived in the UK and many countries, there's one thing. People just take their vehicles to have a wash. They just wash. Do you know how many times you have to go to the garage here now? Because of the potholes, you are hitting potholes after potholes. And when you get there, what do they tell you? The time belt is gone, the crutches are gone, the brakes are gone. Does it require you to be a critic of the regime, to be dissatisfied with what you see? Again, it speaks for itself. The point is, one has to take deliberate action. You know, in Ghana, Ghana is one country that virtually is well endowed like Uganda. Ghana, for a long time, had a big political problem. Its leadership, militarized. It was, you know, it took deliberate action by Jerry Rawlings, if you remember, to turn Ghana around. And what did he do? He dealt with all the deficits. Today, of course, Ghana has its own challenges because, again, sometimes the political circles keep changing. But Ghana is one of those countries that are hailed in Africa of being a democratic state. Why? Because Jerry Rawlings took that deliberate decision to turn around the state. There was a lot of militarization. There was a lot of corruption. There was a lot of, it was bloated. Everything you have here was in Ghana. Today, Ghana is a success story. Not necessarily that it doesn't have challenges. It does, but I think you can talk about it. So the problem is one has to take deliberate action to deal with those deficits in order to achieve the transformation that we are talking about. Okay.
I want to close in 2 also minutes, but of course we can't leave here minus hearing your opinion in regards to the concluded elections, where one of the participants, neither me or you can account for his whereabouts. What do you make of, first of all, the entire process, using a yardstick of free, fair, and credible elections? What do you make of the...
You know, I've spoken about these elections. I don't know.
You haven't spoken to our viewers. Now we speak to our viewers because...
But what I can say is that these elections had serious drawbacks. As I stated at the beginning, we still have to grapple with what we saw. A general election where there is internet shutdown, a general election where biometric machines cannot operate, yet they had been paraded as the solution. A general election where there is heavy deployment of security. A general election where delivery of materials delayed. A general election where transmission of results is still questionable. It left a lot to be desired. And I think it also left a lot of wounds. What is even interesting, more interesting, is that even the disputes they have, the way they are being addressed, leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, you have different standards. In one area, the judicial standard is that when ballot boxes are tampered with,
You don't do a recount.
you have to order a recount. You have to order a repeat. In another area where ballot boxes are open, you still can go with the recounting. I mean, you still cannot understand why we have this sort of treatment. The point is, the elections, for all intents and purposes, did not meet the required threshold. And as such, they have left a lot of disputes and wounds which will need to be healed. And at the end of the day, I think it will be a role of Parliament now. Parliament will need now to seriously address itself to the shortcomings. Because one, if you recall, in the case of Mama Mbabazi versus Yoweri Museveni versus
2016.
The Electoral Commission, the Supreme Court came out clearly
With the
with
recommendations.
recommendations on areas that we really need to address in order to improve our electoral process. Little, if anything, has been done. Now, given the experience we have just gone through, I think it is incumbent upon the new Parliament to discuss and deliberate on the desired reforms before the 2031 general elections. If they don't, then we are going to have a repeat of the same.
Okay. Our viewers, we've had Dr. Ssewanyana's point of view. We hope that you make sense out of every single bit that he has mentioned. And of course, to our dear Parliament, we know in May you'll be sworn in, as a function of Parliament, a new Parliament. We hope that these ideas, as mentioned by Dr. Ssewanyana, are considered. But also to ask you that maybe, as a sector, you look forward to maybe putting on paper your recommendations, maybe to the new Parliament. Who knows? The new Parliament may listen to you.
Yeah, but you see, as civil society, we made our recommendations. They are already there. If you remember 2016 general elections, when we had SION, the Citizens Election Observer Network, we published a report, a comprehensive report on what needs to be done to overhaul the electoral process. There is what is called the Citizens Compact. It is there. Even the Electoral Commission itself
has
made recommendations to Parliament on what needs to be done. So even the Minister of Justice also issued recommendations on what needs to be done. The Supreme Court has issued recommendations. Actually, they have too much. It is already there in black and white. They only have to get it out of the desk and debate it and enact the necessary laws to govern the different aspects of the electoral process that need to be improved.
Okay, our viewers, you can't add anything for now. Like lawyers say, I have nothing useful to add. So thank you, Dr. Ssewanyana, for your time. Catch you, our viewers, some other time. I sign out.
The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk. The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.